Just want you by myself. I've been tossing, turning, staying up all night long. Just want you by myself. I've been tossing, turning, staying up all night long. Just want you by myself. I've been tossing, turning, staying up all night long. Tell me, baby, what's the problem? 'Cause I could try to figure it out. Oh no, oh no. Tell me, baby, what's the problem? I'm only picking up what you're putting down. You'll be tripping, I don't know what about. So what's the problem right now? Okay. I've been tossing, turning.
Chapter 16000. The blonde soon-to-be Hokage paced her office with a mutinous glower, twisting her pretty genjutsued features into an expression more fitting the painted depictions of Tengu, ugly malicious crow spirits. Her office had been cleared, all the broken furniture removed and cleaned. All that remained was a low table and several traditional seiza mats. There was a teapot and several cups on the table, and the light from the slowly sinking sun cast her office in shades of gold and orange. Apart from the slug Sunin, there was no one else in the room. Until now. You summoned us, Tsunadeheim, sneered Danzo as he ghosted his way through her still-shattered doorway, Koharu and Homura shadowing him with the silent cat-like step that no shinobi was ever truly able to rid themselves of. It only reminded her that they were still deadly warriors, only so old because they were good enough to survive that long. Two subtle chakra presences settled into the rafters, unable to completely hide from such finely tuned senses as a medic nin sensor who'd been in at minimum of 2 wars and seen over 40 years of service. Whether or not 10 of those years was spent dodging Yakuza debt collectors and missing nin was a moot point. She still made great use of her senses. Danzu's personal umbu. Yes, she stated, stealing her nerves and not even bothering to hide the fact. Everything was dependent on the fact that she couldn't hide her feelings if she tried. Or rather, on their belief that she couldn't. Sit, please, she added, sounding like she would rather stab them in the eye than offer them any form of hospitality. Which wasn't too far away from the truth in all honesty. Thankfully, the 3 elders, arrogant, self-assured and eager to rub in any failure of hers into her face so they could better kowtow her under their sphere of power and control, eagerly took the offered placemats, sitting with their legs curled beneath them. Tsunade took her seat at the head of the table and offered them a strained smile, hands folded politely in her lap and as unthreateningly as possible. Tea, she offered, gesturing to the pot which was still quietly steaming away in its flawless white and blue patterned porcelain. There wasn't even a moment of hesitation as Koharu nodded her head imperiously. She was just as big of a tea snob as Hyuga Hayashi, Tsunade recalled with dull, almost guilty, amusement. Why have you summoned us, Tsunadeheim? You are entirely too old for tea parties, Danzo stated sharply as the medic nin reached for the pot. There was a moment of silence as Koharu snapped her head around and treated the one-eyed elder with a vicious scowl, every aged line of her face disapproving of his clear lack of decorum. She may have been just as invested in getting Tsunade under their thumb, but manners cost nothing, and Danzo's complete lack of respect for the first female Hokage was not only galling but also insulting and near enough treasonous. Had they been samurai, it would be enough to challenge him to a duel, or demand seppuku. Tsunade half snarled at him, it is called diplomacy and manners, and if you don't shut up right now I will break this pot over your head and leave you with 3rd-degree scolds. If I'm lucky I may ruin the one eye you have left, the woman practically roared, slapping a hand on the floor which had the whole room shaking and set the delicate porcelain cups on the table rattling. There was a moment of stunned silence from the elders before that painful smile returned to the blonde's face and she held the teapot aloft once again. Would you like some tea, Councilman Danzo? She asked, stressing her syllables in warning. He settled down and gestured at her silently to hurry it up, unable to hide the almost sulk in his posture as he caught the almost proud look of Yutadin Koharu's face as her teammate student elegantly went about pouring them a cup of the fresh brew. Peony white tea. The elderly woman admired, picking her cup up and inhaling the delicate fragrance. Tsunade's smile eased a touch as she followed suit, sipping at the pale blend. Yes. It was a gift from Inoichi's wife, Apparently the flowers were of her own garden. I thought it a nice gift and a good way to start my tenure here, as given our positions, I would prefer to keep all meetings between us relaxed and impersonal, the blonde explained as she set her cup down. Sensei didn't leave anything for a successor, but I did find a few documents from when he inducted the Yondaime in. He spoke rather regretfully of his strained relationship with you and how much he valued your thoughts and ideas in regards to Konoha. I would like to avoid such discomfort or unpleasantness between us. Konoha is prosperous for now, but clearly this attack from Oto is a herald that such things will not last for much longer. Konoha needs to present a united front, but more than that, it truly needs to be united, even here. We cannot afford weakness, the new Hokage declared firmly, her brown eyes unwavering as she looked at Koharu, ignoring the two men who had been watching the exchange in silence. In reality, Koharu had always been particularly close to Tsunade. The woman had given her those little touches in her training that only a kunoichi could really give. Sarutobi-sensei tried. He did, but he just didn't quite understand why they were important, or what the best way of doing things for a girl was. Koharu had been the one to teach her those little things, such as how to bind her breasts for training and missions so her ribs would not suffer from compression, like what plants would blacken her hair without damaging it, or how to handle that time of the month without it impacting on her mission performance, at least until she developed the jutsu, which was now a standard kunoichi E-rank jutsu taught in the academy. Little things that kunoichi kept to themselves in their own little society of warrior women. Tsunade set her cup down on the table with surprising delicacy, her hands folding in her lap as she then looked at Danzo, her expression solemn. Councilman Danzo, I do not like you. Sensei has butted heads with you for so long that unfortunately it has bred a rather ill opinion upon myself and Jiraiya. He wrote often that you do what you do only in concern for Konoha. And that is something I do understand. However, I doubt we can ever be friends, but I had hoped that we could repair whatever bridges were burnt in the past. After all, you only stole children from prominent clans, family techniques, and consorted with missing nins, not to mention you have also violated my grandfather's grave and taken part in forbidden Mokuton gene therapy techniques developed by Konoha's most notorious missing nin, she listed coolly, almost pleasantly. Enough so that it actually took them a moment to understand what she said through the pleasant hum of the room's atmosphere and the warmth the tea suffused within their bodies. There was a pause, and then Danzo's empty cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the table as he stared at his fingers, unable to even twitch them. Koharu twitched, attempting to turn and look at the one-eyed elder only. All the nerves in her body went fuzzy and her vision began to spin. What was this? What? Tsunade got to her feet and calmly kicked the table upwards with such force, the two chakra signatures hiding in the rafters were crushed by it. Koharu stared at the blonde woman with dazed eyes and realized, as she watched those delicate petal-painted lips speak, this had been planned. From the second they walked into the room, she planned to put them in this position. Tsunade's eyes were cold, her mouth was smiling, backlit by the setting sun. It was almost symbolic, dramatic, as the light seemed to set the younger woman's hair on fire. The end of an era, their era, the birth of a new will of fire. And Koharu couldn't move. None of them could. They'd been had. Even the two Umbu Danzo had attached to him for protection due to his physical disabilities had been cleanly and efficiently taken out. It was flawless. Tsunade stared down at the three elders, paralyzed by the heat-activated solution she had wiped their cups with before even letting them into the room. Genma, summon Jiraiya, and the Umbu from downstairs. Have these three shipped to T&I for a full mental strip. I want to know everything. Jiraiya will be in charge. Ibiki and Buta will defer to his judgment. Is that understood? The woman ordered as the Senbon chewing special Jounin stepped out from where he had been hidden behind the door frame, invisible to all senses but her own thanks to the chakra suppression tag Jiraiya had planted on him. It shall be done, Hokage-sama, the brunette agreed, thumping his chest and bowing in respect. She watched as Kakashi, Inoichi, and Genma picked the elders up, staring into Danzo's single malevolently glittering eye. Don't forget to strip search them entirely. Danzo always was proficient in Fuinjutsu, she added as the group began to move from her office. Kakashi and Genma exchanged looks and nodded solemnly in agreement. Permission to bring Hyuga Hayashi in, Inoichi requested, holding Koharu bridal style. As much as the elderly kunoichi may have frustrated him, something awful, especially in this latest debacle. She was still his Hanako's Jounin sensei and ultimately the one to introduce them. Until her treason was proven, he would treat her with the respect a kunoichi of her caliber, and a lady of her age, demanded. Granted. I will join you when I have the office cleared and those rats splattered across my ceiling removed, the cage stated, waving them off. No one in Konoha would know what happened in her office that day as the sun finally set, casting long shadows across the worn wood flooring. The Hokage's tower had tunnels leading to most key locations throughout the city. The academy, torture and interrogation, the civilian shelters behind the Cage Mountain, the hospital, the codebreakers, and archive department, Anbu offices. Anyone not already in the torture and interrogation department would only hear the cover story, they would only know what she told them. And depending on what she found, she might even tell them the truth. Might. It all depended on Danzu. She stayed and watched as the hunter nin slipped silently into her office, nodding their hooded and masked faces in her direction, black painted masks putting her in mind of carrion birds as she watched them hang upside down from the ceiling and carefully extract the table, seal it, and remove all trace of the broken corpses, blood, and wood splinters, leaving nothing but broken wood. Not even a damp mark from whatever jutsu it was they did to siphon off the blood. She would have to make a point of learning that. Give them a full workup. I want to know everything you can get from them, the blonde ordered, watching as the hunter nin nodded and vanished down the corridor, feet silent and their presence barely felt upon her senses. Konoha hunter nin were widely considered amongst the best. They captured every rogue ninja from Konoha save those S-ranked threats they couldn't deal with discreetly and those troublesomely lucky A-ranked nin who kept themselves to themselves and didn't cause trouble. The moment they did, the hunter nin would be back, and their quarry would not be so lucky a second time. The Undertaker squad were second only to the upper echelons of Anbu and were much more frightening and shadowy in comparison to their flashier counterparts who visibly worked as village security on top of being the Hokage's Black Ops division, the ones who handled the missions that legally Konoha should never have had their fingers in. And the hunter nin would follow and destroy all evidence of Anbu's involvement should that mission go awry. Hokage-sama. She frowned. Turning at the sound of Genma's voice, he sounded anxious and harried, not a good sign. What is it? She demanded, already moving towards him, readying herself just in case one of the elders appeared in order to fight her. While she had every faith in Jiraiya and the T&I Corps, the elders had only gained such advanced years by being that good at what they did. Old and with somewhat dull edges. Meant nothing when you had the experience and craftiness to make up for such shortcomings. And all three of them had that cunning in spades. Genma shook his head when he saw her. They're still restrained and under the effects of the drug, Tsunade-sama. But, you have to see this. I can't explain it, he told her, shaking his head. Genma had seen a lot, but this was something even he was finding difficult to verbalize. What is it? His cage asked again as they made their way down the stairs towards the basement entrances used by Anbu and Hunter Nin. Genma took a deep breath as they descended into darkness. No lights were used in these tunnels. Not enough air for torches or candles, and electrical lights would cause a hard-to-explain cost on the electric bill. He lit his hand with chakra, filling the tunnel with a quiet eerie blue glow. No one but the Hokage's guard, Anbu, Hunter Nin and high-ranking Jounin were to know of these tunnels unless they were Chuyunin assistants to the Hokage and trusted enough with valuable message-running missions. There's a face in Shimura's arm. He managed to get out. It wasn't the rows of active Sharinon that glared out of his flesh like ruby beads of hatred, it was the face molded into his shoulder. That familiar face, smooth despite the man's wrinkled old flesh, darker skinned and almost peaceful looking, his cheek and eye twitching on occasion. The Shodae's face is growing out of Shimura's arm, he continued, as if trying to convince himself of what he had seen. She faltered for a split second, stomach flipping in disgust and horror. His body will be burned once we've finished with the investigation, she grit out stonily. The last thing anyone wanted was some kind of undead Shodae growing out of dead tissue, especially one that had been implanted with multiple Sharinon. The Edo Tensei Kinjutsu was bad enough when it came to causing nightmares. An undead not under the control of a jutsu was even more frightening. Cremation would be the only guarantee. One would have thought the torture and interrogation department was cold stone and dank dungeons with barely any light and metal torch brackets everywhere. It couldn't have been further from the truth. It was actually quite a pleasant, if clinical, place. It looked more like a hospital clinic than a classical dungeon one would find in the daimyo's palace. The basement was attached to the hunter nin division, and as they passed one of the windows, they could see a group of 5 hunter nins swarming around a pair of corpses laid out on a metal table, blood draining into beakers for analysis and the floor tiling fairly glowing with the amount of fuinjutsu inscribed into the ceramic. Tsunade nodded as the black-garbed men and women went about their work, studying everything about her attackers, unraveling the secrets of Root's training methods, food consumption, jutsu usage, and drug regimen. Genma shook his head mournfully as they passed. "They're kids," he muttered, eyes lingering on the bloody forms. Or rather, the hand he could see poking out from between the ghoulish masked ninja. Any ninja worth their salt could tell someone's age by the lines of their hands, and the nin in there couldn't have been any older than a teenager. Tsunade nodded with a soft sigh. "Danzo likes his ninja young. They're easier to condition and brainwash," she explained bitterly, even though Genma was just as aware of it as she was. It needed to be said out loud. Otherwise it would fester just beneath the surface, poisoning their thoughts. They carried on up the stairs, leaving the grim sight behind as they stepped into a wide corridor flooded with electric lights that stung their eyes after the comfortable chakra-lit gloom of the running tunnels. Men and women in the T&I uniforms were marching up and down the corridors purposefully, casting glances and respectful Hokage-sama, Tsunade-samas at her as they passed. No one stopped to stare. They didn't gawk. They didn't bow. Just a nod of the head, polite acknowledgement, and then on to more important things, like their jobs. This was one of the things that the Slug Sunin truly appreciated about the torture and interrogation division. They didn't waste time and they didn't pander to the egos of others. It was refreshing to see people more interested in getting the job done than brown-nosing their superiors. Ibiki didn't tolerate slackers. The interrogation rooms where the elders had been confined were in the middle floor of the building, just below ground level with no way of getting to the upper floors. Trustworthy jounin were swarming the place. Kakashi, Reidu, Umbu Cat, Uzuki Yujeo, Umbu Raccoon, the young survivor of Orochimaru's Mokitan experiments Tenzu, and Shizune were stood outside the rooms as backup and support, there to make sure that the aging shinobi didn't break free and escape. Marching into Danzo's room, Tsunade felt her blood turn cold as she took in the sight of Jiraiya with sealing scripts in hand, Hyuga Hayashi with his Byakugan bulging almost painfully hard on his face, and Danzo covered in bleeding red welts where the clan head had destroyed his tenketsu, and sealing script being slapped over what was unmistakably the Sharingan. Everything was on display. They had done as requested and completely stripped the older man of his clothing, revealing every invasive surgery he subjected himself to, every bloodline he had stolen and every fuinjutsu seal he had inked onto his flesh. Now, all of which were shut down and impossible to call upon. Hayashi and Jiraiya had ensured that. "What have you done?" the blonde woman breathed, staring at the council elder. Danzo merely glared hatefully up at her, his mouth and right eye hidden under sealing script. Intellectually, she knew, she had been expecting, but, seeing it, with her own eyes, actually seeing his crimes painted out across his skin, was so very different than just hearing about them. Jiraiya straightened, slapping the last of the seal scripts onto the wrinkled flesh of the old man. "Hokage-sama, a word outside," he requested, using the title to not only give her the authority that the elders had been attempting to remove but to also rub it into Danzo's face that now he and his lackeys were accused of treason. They had no power, and their attempts to delay the inauguration were defunct. Tsunade was the Hokage now, and it could not be repealed by any apart from the daimyo and a select group of jounin from Konoha, none of which were loyal to Danzo, and not through lack of trying. Closing the door and waiting as the fuinjutsu that was carved into the chakra-reinforced wood glowed, the Toad Sunin faced his teammate with the most severe facial expression he could muster. She recognized that face. It was the one he wore when he was as serious as the grave. "I want Namikaze hurry in on his interrogation," he declared strongly. Tsunade's eyebrow shot up, but she kept her mouth shut as he explained. Her mind-walking techniques are head and shoulders above the Yamanaka. She simply lacks the experience with interrogation, and with Inoichi holding her hand, that won't be an issue. We should assume Danzo already has countermeasures against the Yamanaka Shintenshin techniques, and may possibly subvert them to either possess a new body, as we've seen Orochimaru do, or turn them into a traitor mole through some form of temporary brainwashing technique typical of Root. Tsunade folded her arms, and if he manages the same with the Namikaze, that would be even worse. She had to catch herself, having almost called the younger woman spit streak in front of the T&I division, something that was hardly professional. And at this, not only turbulent, but also tremulous time, would be a bad idea. Jiraiya shook his head. Senjutsu isn't something you can counter unless you have the talent yourself. And Danzo has been hunting for a way to work those techniques since Orochimaru got a grasp on them, however small, he added with a sour twist of his mouth. When he'd discovered his senjutsu, he thought he'd finally found something he could lord over his teammate, something that his so-called genius couldn't replicate. It turned out that he needn't have bothered. Orochimaru was gifted enough to do so anyway. Tsunade was the only one of them who had no talent for the art, alongside their sensei Sarutobi. The blonde woman pursed her lips, brown eyes narrowing. There's more to it, Jiraiya. What have you got planned? He narrowed his eyes a touch before sighing softly through his nose. I'll explain later, he promised. Tsunade huffed. Very well. She turned, narrowing her eyes on the assembled nin who were standing guard, trying to decide who would be best. Kakashi was too valuable as a fighter to lose in this instance. He possessed a Sharingan that he could use to counter Danzo if he managed to pull something unexpected out. Hayashi would be needed to disable the elders. Shizen was to keep the elders alive long enough to finish the interrogations. Cat and Raccoon were on guard detail and had worked with Kakashi before, thus able to use standard Umbu capture tactics and teamjutsu formations, leaving Reito and Genma. Genma was the better combatant, but Reito was an unknown to Hari and the children. He wouldn't be trusted, and more than likely, given the way Hari was still unable to move and how protective Naruto had turned over her, there would be a scuffle and time would be wasted. Genma, she barked. Fetch Uzumaki Hari. Make sure to leave the genin in the secured room. If you catch Katetsu or Izumo in the area, send them out to fetch some food for them. They've been in there all day, the blonde woman ordered. Genma saluted and dashed off downstairs to a separate floor. That was the only way to access the upper floors and the civilian and lower security holding cells above ground. Gesturing at Jiraiya to follow, Tsunade stepped into the observation room where Shikako was languishing along with Yamanaka Hanako, Inoichi's wife, and a well-respected psychologist. The two gave her a nod but continued to observe the interrogation of a rather naked Mitokedo Homura at the hands of Yamanaka Inoichi and Marino Ibiki. Tsunade turned to Jiraiya. Why the spit streak? She demanded in an undertone. Shikako and Hanako could be trusted, not that the others couldn't, but Jiraiya was clearly antsy and not comfortable sharing his plans in a semi-public location. He dug a hand into his thick white hair. Naruto's determined to be the Hokage, he has a shot at it too. But he can't be Hokage and manage my pairings at the same time. He doesn't have the right mindset either. Hari though. She's got talent. Not to mention her mind-walking techniques. I plan on taking both of them as my students, but while Naruto will be the heir to the Toad Sage, Hari will be the heir to the Master Spy. Even you can't deny what she's done. She's the one who uncovered this whole mess and brought it to the right people's attentions. Naruto wouldn't have the slightest idea of how to handle information like this. He would have gone running to his academy teacher at best and bragged about it from the rooftops, or kept it to himself, at worst. Tsunade waved a hand. Enough, I understand, Jiraiya. But just remember, someday she's going to have to go back. And no one knows when that will be or for how long. She's got a mission to finish. And she'll be getting training to finish it alongside everything else once she's settled, he assured his old teammate. Tsunade-sama. Shikaku's voice interrupted, dragging their attention to the other occupants of the room and the old man currently unconscious in the interrogation chair. We can rule out treason from Mitokage's record. He's done some dodgy stuff in the Hokage's name and all, but aside from his involvement in the Uchiha massacre, it's no worse than anything else we've seen, the Nara clan head reported. There's nothing wrong with him on a deep psychological level, either, Hanako added, leafing through her notes. He is disillusioned with the Sandaime and his predecessor's values, the will of fire, but that is a conditioning, likely due to prolonged contact with Shimura-san. The only interesting blip is his inexplicable trust in Shimura-san. He seems somewhat puzzled by it himself now. He has no memory in which to reinforce that belief, just that he trusts his word and opinion. Not without question, but to a degree that while he may disagree with it, he will allow it. This could be a thing, but we won't know until we've checked with Yudiden-san, the younger blonde woman explained, her blue eyes narrowed and thoughtful as she reported. My thanks, Shikaka, Hanako. I don't think we'll keep you any longer than tonight. Once we've finished with Shimura you'll be free to return to your families and cleared from active duty with pay for the remainder of the week, Tsunade decided. Interrogation was stressful enough, interrogating possibly treasonous council elders who had the power to destroy the village. At a whim was something to tingle the nerves of even the most cynical of Jounin and Black Ops. Shikaka leaned back in his seat and put his feet up. Yeah, it's troublesome, but even more troublesome than this would be the damage done to the village and our ties with various allies if they'd been allowed to run unchecked for however long it took to come to light. If it ever did. A knock on the door halted whatever response the Hokage had to that, and Genma opened the door, Hari perched on his back looking tired and a little confused with her hair loose acting like a curtain down her back and around the pair of them. You wanted me for something? The girl asked as Genma gently lowered her into a chair. A quick shared glance and Jiraiya stepped forward. We want you to assist in Danzo's interrogation. Specifically, in removing his memories. Inoichi will be helping you in selecting only the memories and leaving the emotional impacts of them behind. But for the most part, it will be an in and an out. No lingering, no exploration. We can do that in your mind where it's safer for everyone involved. Danzo likely has failsafes and the like in order to protect himself. But Senjutsu is something he can't manipulate. Meaning you would be not only the safest but also the one able to protect the other interrogators during the extraction process. To Harry, it seemed to make sense. Most bad guys tended to have some form of failsafe to prevent their evil plans from being discovered. Even Naruto had a little protection, but that was Kurama, who just didn't like the idea of people wandering through his territory without permission, and without even wiping their feet. All right, I'll do it. 000 news spread through Konoha like wildfire as the sun rose and threw long glistening shadows across the ground. The market was positively buzzing with gossip and activity. In the aftermath of the honorable late Sandaime, the three elders, Shimura Danzo, Yudiden Koharu, and Mito Kato Homura, had worked themselves into the ground in order to keep the village protected and running. Enough so that when the new Hokage finally arrived and they were allowed to relax, that they grew severely unwell. Unwell to the point that poor Shimura-sama passed away before anyone was able to realize the true extent of how poorly they were. Thankfully, their new Hokage was Tsunade, the medical genius. And both Yudiden-sama and Mito-Kato-sama were saved, though they were confined to their homes under strict bed rest and isolation orders. Their immune systems were so run down that even the tiniest of infections could steal their lives away. No one, not even family, were allowed to visit, and all mail and food had to be strictly monitored and cleaned before being allowed into their homes. Many people commented on how lucky their village was to have such a caring Hokage who was so determined to keep as many of them alive as possible, regardless of how old or useful they were to the village. But not even the news of Shimura Danzo's death could stifle the news that the Yondaime's children had been found. That one of them had been living in Konoha under his mother's maiden name all along. The horrified whispers and gasps that rose from the market when word that Uzumaki Naruto was in fact one of those children would have been likened to that of a displeased snake pit. Umbu did nothing to quiet the rumors, while Root did everything in their power to shut them down. The seeming split in the village's Black Ops force only reinforced the rumors' truth. After all, the Yondaime must have had Umbu protecting his wife and children. The ones not quelling the rumors must have known. It explained why the Jinchuriki boy was so close to the Sandaime, why Jiraiya-sama took such an interest in him, and why Kakashi of the Sharinan was his Jounin sensei. It all made sense. Hang on, wasn't there that pretty red-haired girl, Uzumaki Kushina, seeing the Yondaime for years before the Kyuubi attack? Yeah, they were even in the same academy class. And the Yondaime was the one to rescue her from those Kumo-nin who abducted her years ago? There was another Uzumaki years ago who had whisker marks. Remember? The Shodei's daughter, Inari. Wasn't her mother an Uzumaki as well? Mito, wasn't it? And just like that, the village of Konoha began to stir, and spies from every major village were writhing. Spy networks caught fire with information, and the councils of both Kumo and Iwa began to riot with mixed feelings over the revelation of the Yondaime's legacy. All the while, stood in the kitchen of his dinky apartment, Naruto had his tongue sticking out in concentration, comb in hand as he worked hard to brush his Nichan's pretty long golden hair without pulling on it as she stood, elbow deep in hot water, washing up their breakfast dishes. Neither of them had any idea what was waiting for them on the other side of the front door. That's the end of this chapter. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe for more and to help this channel grow.
You got some